Great.
So hi, my name is Zav Dubois and I'm CEO of evōx Television. I'm here, I'm really proud to be able to interview Coen Gilbert from B Labs. And you know, we're here at South by Southwest and I'm so just proud of the work you guys are doing in the world. And you know, I just want you to talk a little bit and inform people. So people will be watching this on evōx Television. So we'll be running this across, you know, Roku, Apple TV, Xbox, Samsung. So we'll be available in 33 million households in the U.S. market at the end of this month.
Wow.
And so we're growing and we're a startup, you know, and our whole focus is on quality of life, sustainability, and we really want to look at how we can work with vendors and supply chain. And be sure that they're creating products that have less harm on them. To minimize harm. So I think that is the trend, and so for us, it was really a very important step in our development of our organization to start working on our B Lab certification.
Right, very cool.
And so we're not there, and I think that it takes something to get there.
Yeah, well, I mean, appropriately so. Like, it's a high bar, you know. Like, at the end of the day, this is about the company that you keep. And so it may be attractive for evōx TV to be a part of the B-Corp community, mostly because you respect the people that are already in it. So those 800 and some odd companies, from Patagonia to Etsy and Warby Parker to Revolution Foods, are companies that may inspire you or may say, wow, like those entrepreneurs are really getting stuff done. You know, they're making money, they're making a difference, and they're really scaling their impact, not just their top line. And if we can maintain a community that's got those kind of high standards and a high degree of collaboration and mutual support within that community, then hopefully that's a community that evōx and others would want to be a part of. And ultimately, it's the strength of that community that makes it powerful.
So what started you on the idea? Were you at Stanford?
So all three co-founders of B Lab, which is the NGO, the nonprofit behind the B Corp movement, are all buddies from Stanford.
Oh, they are? Okay.
I
just saw Elon Musk at Stanford 2 nights ago.
Is that right?
Yeah, and they were giving a great award for him.
He's done some pretty amazing stuff.
He has.
Yeah, you got to hand it to a man like that with some big, hairy, audacious goals and an ability to get some stuff done too, which is are not always the same thing.
So did you guys start it at Stanford, or?
No, we all had earlier careers, and so my partner Andrew was on Wall Street doing private equity for about 18 years, and myself and Bart Houlihan, the other co-founder, for at least 10 or 12 of those years worked together to create a company called And One, which was a basketball footwear and apparel company that sort of competed with Nike and Adidas and Reebok and the rest. And so we were all leaving that sort of first career, and with similar recognitions that the next part of our career was about how to put our whatever our limited talent and time was to the highest and best use to create a more to use business as a force for good, basically. How do we use business not just to increase shareholder wealth, but to create more of a shared and really durable prosperity for all? And slowly we went through the typical arc of a cashed out entrepreneur or a recovering private equity investor, and said, well, we could either become entrepreneurs again ourselves and hopefully build another really cool inspirational company, or maybe we'll invest in a dozen of those companies and help a dozen of them grow. And what we realized after talking with literally hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs and investors and other thought leaders in the space was that what the world needed was not us to become another individual entrepreneur or another individual social venture fund, but there was some basic infrastructure that was missing from this marketplace that could help all of those entrepreneurs thrive and all those investors more easily find these kinds of high impact companies. And so we sort of decided to do the unsexy stuff of building some of the infrastructure that could really help accelerate the development of the marketplace.
Wow.
And so that's what we've been doing with B Lab.
It's amazing. And so did you guys just start outreach with companies that you targeted, or were they finding you? What was the collaboration process?
Certainly no one knew who that we were to begin with. And so we started by doing what most entrepreneurs do, which is you sort of go where the action is. And so like we're here at South by Southwest Eco because this is a little bit of where the action is. And similarly, Social Venture Network or Bali or Investors Circle are all existing organizations that have attracted sort of high-minded, high-impact entrepreneurs for decades. And so we joined those communities and talked with those entrepreneurs, and it was really through those conversations over a couple-year period as we were each wrapping up the first phase of our professional lives. It was through the conversations with all those entrepreneurs that they're the ones who told us what they needed. And so they needed a way to differentiate good companies from just good marketing, because they were creating markets, but all the other big folks were coming in behind them with lots more resources, but not necessarily with more impact or integrity to their work.
Yeah.
And so they needed a set of standards that would help differentiate the best companies. And they also said that they needed a legal framework that would help them build these organizations to scale. Because one of the big underlying problems that we didn't really know anything about when we first started was this notion that corporate law actually works against creating a sustainable high-impact business. And so the two things that we were really trying to address were standards to help differentiate and a legal structure to help these companies be built to last.
So what do you think, just two things about that corporate structure that was working against sustainability? What are two of the practices or some of the things that you saw?
Well, the main thing is that corporate law in the U.S. says pretty clearly that you only have one duty, one legal obligation, which is to maximize your return for your shareholders.
Got it.
And so we do that really well as a culture, although arguably with the last recession, you might argue not all the time.
Yeah.
And so if what your objective is to actually use profits for a higher purpose, then the existing legal framework actually confuses ends and means. And so this new group of entrepreneurs have no problem with profit, but the profit is not the end objective. The end objective is to create a healthy environment, or to restore a more sustainable food system, or to help low-income communities have better access to clean water, healthcare, education. That's their objective, is to create a positive impact in the world. They recognize that they need to create a scalable, sustainable solution, which requires them to have a profitable business. But the profit is the means, not the end. And so U.S. corporate law has it backwards, right? It says the profit is your only objective. And if profit's your only objective, then by definition, you're going to maximize that. You're going to be legally obligated to maximize that, which often means not such good things for people and the planet. And so what the B-Corp community has done is they all meet standards, legal standards, to be a part of the B-Corp community, which is they have to legally obligate themselves to consider the impact of their decisions on all their stakeholders, not just their shareholders. And now those 800 companies have become a pretty powerful political constituency to actually institutionalize those sort of one-off innovations into law. And so they've actually passed laws in 20 states in the U.S. to create a distinct legal structure, a distinct corporate structure called the benefit corporation.
I just have to tell you, I get goosebumps thinking about the volume of work that you guys must have done, and how much passion, hours, energy, everything you had to put in. I mean, hands down, you guys have changed the structure of something. You've made something available on this planet that has not been available before. B-Lab.
It's cool, but the two things I'd say is, one is it's not B-Lab that did it. B-Lab is sort of like the platform on which business leaders work together to create that kind of systemic change. And so B-Lab might have helped sort of convene and create that conversation. But the thing that changed those laws is when business leaders showed up and said, first to the local bar associations, then to the legislators, hey, the current law doesn't serve our needs, and if you want to support business being part of the solution instead of part of the problem, you need to give us a different option. We're not telling you got to regulate anything. We're not telling you we need a tax break. We're just telling you we need permission to operate business in a way that benefits all, and give us a structure that we can choose from. And so it was really the business leaders themselves, the B-Corp community, that made the difference, and we just provide the platform for them to work together to do that.
And without you guys, you guys are a massive coordination point of everything.
It takes two wings to fly, you know.
Exactly.
And so for sure, B-Lab is playing a really important role, or at least we hope we're playing a really important role. But the world is full of NGOs, really thoughtful nonprofit organizations or academics who talk about how the world ought to be, but don't necessarily have the credibility of the business community to get the attention of legislators to affect policy change. And so I think it's the combination of really thoughtful agenda, but with really credible advocates for that agenda, which are the CEOs of those 800 companies. Because the truth is, like, there's a great saying that we can go faster alone, but we can go further together. And so I think that that's like a core organizing principle of the B-Corp community, is that all of these amazing CEOs recognize that no matter how big and important their individual business is, that we can only affect this kind of systemic change if we work together.
What inspires you most about your organization?
the people. You know, B-Lab is full of about 30, 32 folks that are the smartest, hardest working, most fun people to work with, and so I feel blessed every day that I get to come to work doing something that I think is meaningful with people that I really respect, and that we can be of service, because ultimately we're a service organization. We're not the ones out there making the change. We're not the one building those companies that are changing the way the world does business. That's what the entrepreneurs are doing, and that's what the investors are doing. But if we can act as a strong service organization to serve those leading entrepreneurs and business leaders and investors, then we feel like we're making a good contribution.
And what are some of your challenges in your organization right now?
I'd say the biggest gap between what we'd like to be and what we are is around just the pace of the work. And so we always try to remind ourselves that we're running a marathon, not a sprint, and that this is a generational change that we're after. And if you're doing that, it means you got to pace yourself. And I'd say that pretty clearly that we're not pacing ourselves at the moment particularly well. Everybody's working really hard and finding it really rewarding, but there's no way we could keep up this pace for the decade or more that it will take to affect the kind of change we want to. And so I think our biggest struggle is how to continue to be effective while not working 25 hours a day, 8 days a week.
Yeah, culturally we've been dealing with the same thing we talked about a little bit earlier. It's like you have these great organizations you're developing that are game changers, or they're helping put some pointers out in the world about here's the directions we could go in business. And then you have a dedicated team of staff. I used to work for Amnesty International years ago, and it was such a passion project, but we would be so exhausted.
Yeah.
And you give all your time and energy away, and then suddenly at some point you're just like done. There's no more left to give. And I think in a sustainable organization, that's where we're confronting ourselves at evōx right now, is how do we have that passion be there and still appreciate that there's this beautiful planet to enjoy and there's hikes to take and everything else.
Yeah, at the end of the day, social change is a team sport, and that team has to be around to play. And if the team is so exhausted that they can't get up to play, then you're not going to get very far. And so I think that we've got to figure out how to allow ourselves to pull back the throttle and refresh and rejuvenate and support each other in doing that.
How would you do that? I think that's the big question, because we have the same questions, like how do you do it? Because it feels like you're driven, you have results in front of you, and yet the right
the more
things.
success, the more opportunity,
That's
and so, which is a high-class problem. And so the short answer is I don't know. Like if I knew, I'd bottle it, and I have enough money to fund B-Lab forever.
Exactly, right.
But I'd say that I'm. I think sometimes even the best of us need others to tell us what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. Like sometimes it's helpful to have somebody else say, it's okay, you can go home now, or it's okay, you can take tomorrow off. Because if left to our own devices, we're all pretty type A driven folks, and so we're all going to just keep on the treadmill. And so one of the things that I'm wrestling with is whether or not we should institute a 4-day week, right? Or or some type of time where it's sort of, or like the phones are unplugged at 5, or just something that literally says you don't have a choice. You're being told to go refresh yourself, because if left to your own devices, we'll all be our own worst enemies, right?
One of my friends works for a tech company in San Francisco, and they now instituted a policy where they turn off the internet between 10 and 12, and they turn it back on for 1 to 4, because email has been such a derogatory thing in the organization, and they've relied on it, and it just kills productivity.
Well, I think that there's something to that, and I think that's an example of there's such an immense gravitational pull to our various screens, and there's such an energy to say, wow, there's a lot of stuff that has to be done. We got to do it, right? Because if not us, who? That sometimes you just need to, like, literally, in that case, pull the plug or lock the door, and sort of kick people out and say, not only for your own benefit, but for our collective benefit, we need you to be fresh. And the truth is, most of our best ideas don't come while we're sitting there responding to 200 emails a day.
Right.
Our best emails come when we're out for a hike or a run or just doing something completely not relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And then it allows the space for some insight to show up. That might have been there all along, but there was too much noise that you couldn't hear it, or too much smoke that you couldn't see it. And so I think that one of the things we have to do is to create the quiet for those insights to show up so then we can act on them. And I think that at least my growing realization is that that's going to have to become a rule, not a request.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. There's a couple other things I want to ask you. One is, so there's this notion in the Midwest. I grew up in the Midwest, and so that we're always, thank you. It's a great place to grow up.
No doubt.
But the kind of thing that we go through in the Midwest, which is kind of one of those things that they say about the Midwest, is we're always there to help people. We're always out there helping people. But when it comes for us to get help, we're like, oh, we don't need help.
Yeah.
We don't need help. And it's something I deal with in my own company. It's like we're always out there. How can we elevate? I mean, evox is really a platform to elevate great work in the world. So elevating you, elevating other companies. It's like we're kind of the middleman.
Yeah.
We're not the main event. We are the middleman for possibility, if you will. What work can the evox community do? So we're looking at, as we grow, what could we do that's supportive of your work? Like, what could this community do? Because they're going to see this and they're going to go, well, how can we be involved? Or what can we do either from helping to raise money, helping to get other businesses involved? What would be the best way to support you?
Right. So it's a great question. So evōx is a media company, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the most important things when you're creating systemic change is around changing norms. And changing, in addition to like the institutional stuff that we're doing with the law or capital markets, is also just changing behavior, right? Normative behavior. And so, and a lot of that is driven by the stories that we tell and the frames that we put around things. And so I think the work that evōx is doing is incredibly important because you're giving a platform for folks to tell their stories. And if there's a way for evōx to shine a light on B-Corps, individually or collectively, I think you're creating a conversation and you're shining a light on folks that are creating, building a better mousetrap. You know, and ultimately, we can't choose to support something that we don't know exists, and if it only exists in theory but not in practice, that it's not really actionable. And so B Corps put a lot of the theory of sustainable business or conscious capitalism into practice. And so for people to know, for you to help people know that they're real living and breathing companies that are making money and making a difference and doing it at scale, I think that's a huge contribution from evōx. And helping those individual companies tell their individual stories, or helping us at B-Lab tell the overarching story, I think that's a huge benefit.
Well, we're there for you. I mean, we'll do, you know, I mean, I love what you guys are doing in the world. We'll do anything we can. And I think for the evōx audience, you know, we have a whole retail store. So yeah, so we have both our programming division, and then we have a whole retail store online.
Gotcha.
And so we're featuring stores. We have a whole B-Lab section up there.
No way.
A B-Corp section, yeah.
That's awesome.
So people can start to look like, you know, if you want to look for people who are B-Corp certified, they can do that way.
That's very cool. Now, are you buying inventory, or is it sort of a storefront and then people do their own fulfillment from their various warehouses?
We have tons of vendors, and so we do drop ship model right now, and we'll be using Amazon distribution in the future to do fulfillment for us.
Awesome.
So we have some really great vendors. I mean, if you go down to our booth, you'll see a lot of the products that we represent right now. We have over 1,500 products, and we work with a lot of them actually have some B-Corp certification, or they're working on B-Corp certification. So we've been talking to them about it already. But that really is how we're kind of getting out. It's like if you go in the store and we can get the word out about what's happening, then they can do searches that way.
Well, I think that's a pretty cool thing, because you tell the story and then people are motivated to say, well, how can I get involved? Right? And so one way they can get involved is you can say, oh, if you want to support companies like this, click here, and here's sort of a gated community of those companies, or a vetted community of companies that you know you can trust. And so the extent that you're helping people connect inspiration with action through the evōx platform, I think that's awesome. But the other thing is, I think treating people like the only way that they can engage is as consumers is limiting. Because I don't want to be called a consumer. You know, I'm a human being, and sometimes I buy things, and sometimes I invest in things, but I go to work for different companies. There's lots of different ways that we can affect the marketplace. And so the other thing that I would say to the evōx community is not just to sort of integrate your values into your purchases through the evōx store or similar things like that, but every one of us is probably working somewhere. And so how can we help that company, whether you're the CEO or whether you're the shipping manager, how do you help that company take the next step, whether it's their first step or their 101st step down the path to sustainability? And I think you can use the B-Impact assessment as a free educational tool. Maybe your company is not interested in or is interested in but will never want to be certified. That's fine. There's a lot. This is a much bigger movement than just those that are certified B Corps.
Can you talk about B-Impact? Because a lot of people aren't going to know what it is. It's an amazing tool.
Yeah, so the impact assessment is basically a free management tool for any business to use to begin to assess their overall social and environmental performance. So how they treat their workers, how they engage with their community, their environmental practices. And so it provides a really useful roadmap without being prescriptive. And so it says, if you care about this stuff, here's how you might want to think about it. And what we've found is that whether it's companies that are starting out down this path for the first time, or whether it's companies like Patagonia or 7th Gen that have been doing this for decades, each of those folks at either end of the spectrum find it incredibly useful because it widens the aperture on their lens to look at things that they haven't looked at before. And embedded within the tool are all kinds of resources and best practices and all things that help you say, oh, I'm really interested in how to do a life cycle assessment, or how can I have a local purchasing strategy, or how can I do an environmental audit? And all of those things, you click a little button and boom, there's a 6 or 8 page.
And it's a free assessment tool.
It's totally free.
Yeah.
And so there's like 15,000 businesses
What's the
around
URL?
So bimpactassessment.net, or you can just go to bcorporation.net. Either way, you can get to the same place.
So great.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the most important things is no matter where you're working, it's either for your company or maybe for one of your vendors that you can introduce to it. And it's free and useful. And so it's a great way to get engaged. That isn't about you, where you spend your money. That's also a good thing. But also where you spend your time is probably more important. And the most effective way we can use our time is to begin asking the critical questions for what makes a responsible business, what makes a sustainable business. And so this will help people ask the right questions and then decide how they want to answer them.
What do you think about businesses that seem to be so far away from the values of B Corp?
Yeah.
We have a policy over evōx that we don't disparage any other companies,
Right.
period.
Yep.
It's all about, companies are made of people, and there's always good people in any
Right.
organization.
Right.
So do you have any kind of strategy where you reach out to people in any particular way? I mean, are there any companies out there that you would just be, and you don't have to mention them, but any really thrilling people you'd like to have on board?
Well, I think that like evōx, I think one of the core principles of the B Corp community is that we stand for something, not against anything. And so what we stand for is companies that are part of the solution, right? That are competing to be the best in the world at being the best for the world, best for their workers, best for the communities, best for the environment. And the truth is, every company would like to do that. Some are just more skillful at doing it than others. And so I don't think we show up with any judgment that, oh, that company's farther away from these B Corp values. I don't think these values are B Corp values or not B Corp values. I think everybody values people and place. But I think what people have different degrees of is the time that they're willing to commit to taking the first step and then the next step and then the next step. And so I think the thing that's really important is to recognize that while these 800 and some odd certified B Corps are leaders, they're leaders of a much broader movement to redefine what it means to be successful in business, and that any business can be a part of that. And so whether they're big or small, in an old industry or in the new economy, it's not so much about what you're doing, but about how you're doing it. And so we try to give those folks through the B-Impact assessment the tools that they can use to practice more responsible, more sustainable business a little bit more skillfully.
Jay, thank you so much.
You got it, brother.
Really appreciate
Thanks
it.
a lot,
Pleasure
Tom.
to meet you. Thanks
Nice
for
to meet you
everything
too.
you're doing in the world, man.
Thank you.
Okay.